The Cursed Princess. Once upon a time, in the prosperous kingdom of Rosehaven, King Edward and Queen Isabella lived in happiness. However, despite their wealth and power, one sorrow clouded their hearts: they had no heir. After years of prayers and offerings, their wish was finally granted. The queen gave birth to a beautiful baby girl with eyes as bright as the stars and a smile that could warm the coldest hearts. The king joyfully named her Aurora. But their joy was short-lived. On a stormy night, a mysterious sorcerer appeared at the palace. Cloaked in darkness and speaking with a voice that sent chills down their spines, he delivered a chilling prophecy. Princess Aurora bears a curse. If she grows up in this palace, the kingdom will fall into despair, plagued by famine, war, and endless suffering. The king and queen were devastated. They adored their newborn daughter, but the fear of the curse loomed large. Torn between love and duty, King Edward made a heartbreaking decision. Princess Aurora must be sent far away to live a life of secrecy and safety, away from the palace and the threat she supposedly carried. Under the cover of night, royal guards took baby Aurora to a small, remote cottage on a mountain in the northern wilderness. Accompanying her was an elderly servant named Margaret. Loyal to the royal family, Margaret was tasked with raising the princess in anonymity, protecting her from the world, and the world from her. As Aurora grew up in the humble cottage, she knew nothing of her true heritage. She thought herself an ordinary girl, living a simple life in the mountains. Despite the hardships, she showed remarkable kindness and intelligence. With Margaret's guidance, Aurora developed a deep love for the people around her, often helping the villagers nearby with whatever little she had. Yet Margaret carried a heavy burden in her heart, the fear of the prophecy. She constantly reminded Aurora to stay away from strangers and never reveal her true identity. But even in the isolation of the mountain, Aurora's radiant spirit could not be hidden. Her compassion and gentle heart shone like a beacon. Little did she know, her destiny was far greater than she could imagine. One day, the truth of her lineage would come to light, and her fate would shake the entire kingdom of Rosehaven. Years passed, and Aurora grew into a lovely young woman. Life in the mountains was simple but challenging. Yet Aurora's cheerful spirit turned even the hardest days into moments of joy. She spent her days helping Margaret with daily chores, fetching water from the stream, and tending to a small garden behind their cottage. Despite their modest means, Aurora felt content, surrounded by the natural beauty of the mountains and the kindness of the villagers. The villagers adored her, though they knew little about her background. Aurora's warm smile and selflessness made her beloved. She often gave what little she had to those in need and spent hours assisting elderly villagers with their work. Her kindness became her trademark. But Margaret always reminded her to keep a low profile. "You mustn't draw too much attention, Aurora," Margaret warned sternly one day. "The less they know about you, the safer you'll be." Aurora didn't understand Margaret's constant fear. "Why are you so afraid, Margaret? What danger could possibly come to someone like me?" Margaret hesitated, her face clouded with worry. But she said nothing more. One sunny afternoon, while walking to the village market, Aurora heard the laughter of children near the river. Curious, She wandered closer and saw a group of boys skipping stones across the water. Suddenly, one of the boys lost his footing and fell into the fast-moving current. The others screamed for help, but no one dared to jump in. Without a second thought, Aurora dashed into the river, battling the strong current. She reached the boy and pulled him to the shore. The villagers, drawn by the commotion, surrounded her, cheering her bravery. The boy's mother wept with gratitude and embraced Aurora. Though Aurora felt proud of her actions, Margaret's reaction was the opposite. When she returned home, dripping wet and exhausted, Margaret was furious. "What were you thinking, Aurora?" Margaret exclaimed. "You could have been recognized. Or worse." Aurora frowned, puzzled. "Recognized? By whom? I only wanted to help someone in need. How could that be wrong?" Margaret sighed deeply, her voice softening. "You have a good heart, my dear. But there are secrets in this world, secrets about you, that must remain hidden." Unbeknownst to both of them, Aurora's heroic act had caught the eye of a cloaked figure standing in the shadows. This figure, a messenger from the royal palace, had been traveling through the countryside on a secret mission. The way Aurora carried herself, her poise, her grace, seemed oddly familiar. Intrigued, the messenger decided to investigate further. By the time the sun set, the messenger had reached the palace gates. Standing before King Edward and Queen Isabella, he bowed deeply. "Your Majesties," he said, "I believe I may have found someone who matches the description of your daughter." The king and queen, who had spent years regretting their decision, felt their hearts stir with hope. Could it be true? Could their daughter Aurora still be alive? And if so, had the curse truly been avoided, or was it merely lying in wait? The morning sun painted the mountains in shades of gold as Aurora worked in her garden. She hummed a cheerful tune, unaware that her life was about to change forever. As she tended to the flowers, a shadow loomed over her. Startled, she looked up to see a man in a dark cloak standing at the gate. "Are you Aurora?" the man asked, his voice calm but commanding. Aurora hesitated, glancing toward the cottage where Margaret was nowhere to be seen. "Yes, I am," she replied cautiously. "Who's asking?" Without answering, the man handed her an ornate scroll, sealed with the royal crest of Rosehaven. Aurora's eyes widened at the unfamiliar symbol. "This is an invitation to the royal palace," the man said. "You are summoned to attend the grand festival in 3 days' time. It is a rare honor." Aurora stared at the scroll, her heart racing. Why would the royal family invite someone like her? Before she could ask, the man turned and disappeared down the path, leaving her alone with the scroll. When Margaret returned and saw Aurora holding the scroll, her face turned pale. Snatching it from Aurora's hands, she tore the seal open and read the contents. "You cannot go," Margaret said firmly, her voice trembling. "It's too dangerous." Aurora frowned. "Why not, Margaret? Why is it so dangerous? I've never even left these mountains. Don't I deserve to see more of the world?" Margaret shook her head. "There are things about your life you don't understand. Secrets that must remain hidden. Please, Aurora. For your own safety, You must stay here. But Aurora's curiosity had been awakened. For as long as she could remember, she had lived in the shadow of Margaret's fear and secrecy. The invitation felt like a chance to break free, to discover the truth about herself. Margaret, I can't stay hidden forever, Aurora said softly. Maybe this is my destiny. Margaret's expression softened, and her shoulders sagged in defeat. If you insist on going, I can't stop you, she said. But promise me, Aurora, promise me you'll be careful. Trust no one. And whatever you learn, remember who you are. Aurora nodded, her heart heavy with both excitement and apprehension. I promise. Margaret. On the morning of the festival, Aurora packed a small bag with her few belongings. Dressed in a simple gown, she set out for the palace, her heart filled with anticipation. Margaret stood at the doorway, watching her go with tears in her eyes. Goodbye, my dear, Margaret whispered. May the stars guide you. As Aurora walked down the mountain path, she felt a mixture of hope and fear. The palace, with all its mysteries and grandeur, awaited her. What secrets would she uncover? And how would they change her life, and the kingdom of Rosehaven, forever? Aurora's journey to the palace was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The bustling villages, vibrant markets, and endless green fields along the way fascinated her. Every step brought her closer to the royal palace, a place she had only heard about in stories. As the grand towers of the palace came into view, her breath caught in her throat. It was magnificent, with golden spires that seemed to touch the sky and gates adorned with intricate carvings of roses and vines. Upon arriving, she joined a long line of guests waiting to enter. Everyone around her was dressed in fine silks and sparkling jewels, making Aurora feel self-conscious in her simple gown. But her beauty and grace, though understated, still drew curious glances from those nearby. Who is she? Whispered one noblewoman. She doesn't look like one of us, another murmured. Aurora lowered her eyes, determined to stay unnoticed. But the feeling of being out of place lingered. Inside the palace, the festival was a dazzling spectacle. The grand hall was decorated with chandeliers that shimmered like stars, and tables overflowed with exotic foods and drinks. Musicians played enchanting melodies, and nobles danced elegantly across the marble floor. Aurora stood at the edge of the room, taking it all in, her heart pounding with excitement and nerves. Suddenly, a commanding voice echoed through the hall. Welcome, honored guests. It was King Edward, standing beside Queen Isabella at the head of the room. Tonight, we celebrate the unity and prosperity of our kingdom. May this festival bring joy to all. As the crowd cheered, the Queen's eyes scanned the room. When her gaze fell on Aurora, she froze. There was something hauntingly familiar about the young woman. She leaned toward the king and whispered urgently, Edward. Could it be her? The king's expression darkened as he followed her gaze. We cannot be certain, he replied. Not yet. Meanwhile, Aurora wandered through the hall, marveling at the splendor. She had never seen anything so grand, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong. As she admired a golden tapestry, a deep voice startled her. You seem different from the others," the voice said. Aurora turned to see a young man with a kind smile and striking blue eyes. He was dressed in royal attire, and she quickly realized he must be someone important. I'm just here for the festival," Aurora stammered. "Nothing more." The man chuckled softly. "I'm Prince Gabriel." "And you are?" Aurora hesitated, unsure if she should reveal her name. "Aurora," she finally said. "Just Aurora." Prince Gabriel looked at her thoughtfully, as if trying to piece something together. "Aurora. It's a beautiful name. I hope you enjoy the evening." With a polite bow, he walked away, leaving Aurora both flustered and intrigued. As the night went on, Aurora tried to stay out of the spotlight, but it seemed impossible. Her natural grace and charm drew the attention of many, including nobles and palace staff. Unbeknownst to her, whispers began to spread. "Who is that girl? She doesn't seem like she belongs here. But there's something about her." Even the king and queen couldn't take their eyes off her. "If it's truly her, we must know," Queen Isabella said firmly. "But if the curse is real," the king trailed off, his voice heavy with doubt. By the end of the evening, Aurora felt both exhilarated and overwhelmed. She had experienced a world she never imagined, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening behind the scenes. As she prepared to leave, a palace servant approached her. "Miss Aurora," the servant said, bowing, "the king and queen request your presence." Aurora's heart raced. What could they possibly want with her? With a deep breath, she followed the servant toward the throne room, unaware that this meeting would reveal secrets that could change her life forever. Aurora's footsteps echoed through the grand hall as the servant led her toward the throne room. The doors, tall and carved with intricate patterns of roses and vines, loomed before her. Her heart raced, each beat louder than the last. Why had the king and queen summoned her? She had no answers, only the weight of uncertainty pressing on her. The servant pushed the doors open, and Aurora stepped inside. The throne room was vast and opulent, with marble floors gleaming under the glow of golden chandeliers. At the far end of the room sat King Edward and Queen Isabella on their majestic thrones. Their regal presence was both intimidating and awe-inspiring. "Come closer," the queen commanded, her voice soft yet filled with authority. Aurora obeyed, stepping cautiously forward until she stood at the foot of the dais. She bowed her head, unsure of what to say or do. "You are Aurora, correct?" the king asked, his deep voice resonating through the hall. "Yes, Your Majesty," she replied, her voice trembling. "But I don't understand why I'm here." The queen leaned forward, her piercing gaze fixed on Aurora. "There is something familiar about you," she said. "Tell me, where are you from? Who raised you?" Aurora hesitated, feeling the intensity of their questions. "I was raised in the mountains by a kind woman named Margaret," she answered. "She's all I've ever known. She never told me much about my past." At the mention of Margaret's name, the queen's eyes widened. She turned to the king, her voice trembling. "Edward, could it be? Could this truly be her?" The king's expression darkened, his voice heavy with doubt. "We cannot jump to conclusions. We need proof." The queen turned back to Aurora, her voice softening. Aurora, there is a reason you were invited to the palace tonight. Many years ago, we lost someone very dear to us, our infant daughter. We were told she carried a curse that could destroy the kingdom. And in our desperation, we sent her away to protect her and our people. Aurora stared at them in disbelief. Your daughter, she whispered. That can't be. Margaret never told me anything like this. The king nodded solemnly. Aurora, there is a way to confirm this. When our daughter was born, we gave her a locket, an heirloom passed down through generations. If you are truly her, you will have the locket. Aurora's heart skipped a beat. Margaret had once shown her a small golden locket, saying it was a keepsake from her parents. Could it really be the same one? Hesitant, she reached into her satchel and pulled out the locket. Its golden surface glinted under the chandelier's light as she held it out for the king and queen to see. The queen gasped, tears streaming down her face. It's hers, she said, her voice breaking. It's the locket we gave our daughter. The king's expression softened. His eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and relief. Aurora, you are the princess of Rosehaven, our daughter, whom we thought we had lost forever. Aurora felt the room spin as their words sank in. Everything she had known, her entire life, was a lie. She was not a simple girl from the mountains. She was royalty, with a past she had never imagined and a destiny she could not fathom. But even as the truth unfolded, doubts clouded her mind. If I am your daughter, she said, her voice trembling, what about the curse? If what you say is true, am I not still a danger to the kingdom? The queen took her hands, her voice filled with both love and determination. Aurora, we made a mistake in listening to that prophecy all those years ago. Your presence here now feels like a blessing, not a curse. We will face whatever comes together. As a family. The king nodded, but a shadow of uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Aurora, you have returned to us. But the journey ahead will not be easy. There are still questions to answer and truths to uncover. Aurora's heart was heavy with conflicting emotions. She had come to the palace seeking adventure and perhaps a sense of belonging. But she had found something far greater, and far more daunting. As she stood before the king and queen, she realized her life would never be the same. Aurora woke in a lavish room, sunlight streaming through the tall arched windows. The events of the previous night felt like a dream. Yet the golden locket resting on the bedside table was proof of its reality. She was no longer a simple girl from the mountains. She was Princess Aurora, heir to the kingdom of Rosehaven. The palace maid, a cheerful woman named Eliza, knocked softly before entering. Good morning, Your Highness, she said, curtsying. The king and queen have requested your presence in the dining hall. Aurora winced at the formal title. It felt foreign, almost burdensome. Please, just call me Aurora, she replied with a small smile. I'm not used to all this. Eliza smiled kindly. As you wish, Aurora. But you'll need to adjust quickly. Palace life has its own challenges. Walking to the dining hall, Aurora marveled at the grandeur of the palace. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting the kingdom's history. and golden chandeliers hung like clusters of stars. Yet, despite the beauty, Aurora felt a strange sense of unease. She was an outsider in a world she barely understood. At the long dining table, King Edward and Queen Isabella awaited her. Their expressions were warm, yet tinged with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Good morning, Aurora," the Queen greeted. "I hope you slept well." Aurora nodded politely, though her mind was spinning. "Your Majesties," she began hesitantly, "I appreciate your kindness, but I don't know how to be a princess. I've lived a simple life. This all feels so overwhelming." The king placed a reassuring hand on hers. "Aurora, we don't expect you to adapt overnight. This is your home now, and we will help you every step of the way," the queen added, her voice gentle. "You are our daughter, and that alone makes you worthy. But we also understand the weight this truth brings. Take your time." After breakfast, Aurora was given a tour of the palace. She learned about the kingdom's history, its governance, and her role as heir. Yet, with every new responsibility explained, her chest grew heavier. She thought back to the quiet simplicity of her life in the mountains. Was this truly her destiny? As the day wore on, Aurora found herself in the royal gardens, seeking solace among the blooming roses and tranquil fountains. She was startled to find Prince Gabriel there, leaning casually against a marble bench. "Ah, the mysterious Aurora," he said with a teasing grin. "Or should I say, Princess Aurora?" Aurora managed a weak smile. "I'm still getting used to the idea myself." Gabriel sat beside her, his tone turning more serious. "I can't imagine what you must be feeling. To suddenly learn your royalty, it must be overwhelming." Aurora sighed, the weight of her thoughts spilling out. "I've spent my whole life thinking I was someone else. Now, I'm supposed to be this princess. But I don't know if I can live up to it." Gabriel's gaze softened. "Being a royal isn't about perfection. It's about heart. From what I've seen, you have more heart than most people here. That's what truly matters." His words offered a small comfort, but they also stirred a question within her. "What about the curse?" she asked quietly. "Do you believe in it?" Gabriel hesitated before answering. "I don't know. But I do know this, fate is rarely as simple as a prophecy. You have the power to shape your own story." Aurora. That evening, as Aurora prepared for bed, a knock came at her door. It was Queen Isabella, holding a small, worn book. "This belonged to you as a baby," the queen said, handing it to Aurora. "It was one of the few things we sent with you. I thought it might help you remember who you are." Aurora opened the book, her fingers tracing the faded pages. Inside, she found a lullaby written in the queen's elegant handwriting. The words brought tears to her eyes. For the first time, she felt a connection to the life she had lost. As the queen kissed her forehead and left, Aurora sat by the window, staring at the moonlit gardens. The truth of her heritage had brought her back to the palace. But questions lingered. Who was she truly meant to be? And what role would she play in the kingdom's future? The days following Aurora's revelation were a whirlwind. She was introduced to the court, where nobles and advisors eyed her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Though some greeted her warmly, others whispered behind her back, their words laced with doubt. Is she truly the princess? What of the curse? Could she bring misfortune to the kingdom? Aurora pretended not to hear, but the rumors weighed heavily on her heart. She had spent her life being loved by the villagers. Now she found herself judged and doubted in her rightful home. One morning, as Aurora wandered the library, searching for solace among the towering shelves of ancient books, she stumbled upon a faded journal. Its leather cover was cracked with age, and its spine bore the royal crest. Opening it, she discovered it was a record of the royal family's history, written by a former court scribe. As she flipped through its pages, one entry caught her eye, the prophecy of the cursed princess. Her breath caught as she read the account of the sorcerer's warning, the fear that had gripped her parents, and the decision to send her away. The princess carries a great burden, the entry read. A curse that will bring famine, war, and despair unless her heart remains pure. Aurora's fingers trembled as she closed the journal. What does it mean to have a pure heart? She murmured. How can I prove I am not a curse? That afternoon, during court proceedings, Aurora watched her parents address matters of the kingdom. A delegation of farmers pleaded for aid, their lands ravaged by an unexpected drought. As the king and queen deliberated, Aurora's thoughts raced. Was this the curse? Had her return already begun to harm the kingdom? After the meeting, she approached King Edward, her voice trembling. Father, what if the drought is my fault? What if the curse is real? The king placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Aurora, the drought is a challenge we face as rulers, not a punishment tied to you. You are not a curse, you are our daughter. But his words did little to ease her fears. Aurora couldn't ignore the unease growing within her. She needed answers. That evening, Aurora found herself in the palace gardens once again. The moon cast a silvery glow over the flowers, and the soft chirping of crickets filled the air. She wasn't surprised when Prince Gabriel appeared, his usual grin replaced with a look of concern. You've been quiet, he said, sitting beside her. What's on your mind? Aurora hesitated, then spoke. The curse. Everyone whispers about it. And now I've read about it myself. What if it's true? What if my presence here brings harm to the kingdom? Gabriel studied her for a moment before replying. I've lived in this palace long enough to know one thing: people fear what they don't understand. You've spent years living in the mountains, untouched by greed or ambition. That purity of heart, that's what the prophecy speaks of. It's your strength, not a curse. His words comforted her, but doubts lingered. What if I fail? She asked softly. Gabriel smiled. You won't. I've seen how you care for others, how you carry yourself. You have nothing to prove to anyone but yourself. As they sat in the garden, Aurora felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Gabriel was right. Perhaps she could rise above the whispers and doubts. But deep inside, she knew the path ahead would not be easy. To truly claim her place in the kingdom, she would need to confront the shadow of the curse and prove to herself, and to everyone else, that she was worthy of the crown. The days passed. and Aurora slowly began to adjust to life in the palace. Despite the whispers and doubts surrounding her, she found moments of peace in her growing friendship with Prince Gabriel and her parents' unwavering support. However, the shadow of the curse still loomed, and Aurora knew she couldn't ignore it forever. One morning, a royal advisor named Lord Reginald, known for his stern demeanor, approached the king and queen during a council meeting. Aurora sat quietly in a corner, observing the proceedings. "Your Majesties," Lord Reginald began, "the people are uneasy about the princess's return. They fear the curse may already be at work. The drought has worsened, and tensions are rising in the eastern provinces." Queen Isabella frowned. "We cannot let baseless fears dictate our actions. Aurora has proven herself to be kind and capable." But Lord Reginald pressed on. "Kindness is not enough to rule a kingdom. Your Majesty, perhaps the princess should undertake a test, a journey to the eastern provinces to address the people's concerns directly. Let her prove her worth." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Aurora. She felt a mix of fear and determination rise within her. Finally, she stood and spoke. "If this is what the people need, I will go. I wish to serve the kingdom, not as a symbol of fear, but as someone who can bring hope." The king and queen exchanged worried glances but ultimately agreed. "Very well," King Edward said. "Aurora, you will journey to the eastern provinces with a small escort. Gabriel will accompany you for protection." The following day, Aurora and Gabriel set out on horseback, traveling through the lush countryside. As they ventured eastward, the effects of the drought became increasingly apparent. Crops withered in the fields, and villagers looked weary and desperate. Aurora's heart ached at the sight. When they reached the first village, they were greeted by wary eyes and whispers. Aurora dismounted her horse and approached a group of farmers. Her voice gentle. "I am Aurora, the Princess of Rosehaven. I have come to hear your concerns and see how we can help." An elderly farmer stepped forward, his face lined with years of hard work and worry. "Your Highness," he said cautiously, "we've heard of the curse. Some say your return has brought the drought upon us." Aurora felt a pang of guilt but pushed it aside. "I understand your fears," she said. "But I promise you, I am here to help, not to harm." She spent the day listening to the villagers' concerns, helping where she could. She distributed food from their supplies, worked alongside the farmers in their fields, and played with the children, her laughter bringing a rare moment of joy to the village. That evening, as she sat by a small campfire with Gabriel, he gave her an approving nod. "You're proving everyone wrong, Aurora," he said. "You're showing them the kind of leader you can be." Aurora smiled but remained thoughtful. Kindness alone won't solve their problems. "Gabriel, I need to do more." The next morning, Aurora met with the village elders and proposed a plan. She suggested digging a new well and establishing irrigation channels to bring water to their crops. With Gabriel's help, she rallied the villagers to work together. And by the end of the week, their efforts bore fruit. The new well provided a fresh water source, and the villagers' spirits began to lift. As Aurora prepared to leave, the elderly farmer who had spoken to her earlier approached. Your Highness, he said, bowing deeply. I doubted you when you arrived. But you've shown us your heart. You are no curse. You are our blessing. Tears filled Aurora's eyes as she embraced the farmer. Thank you, she whispered. I only wish to serve my people. As Aurora and Gabriel rode away from the village, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The whispers of doubt might still linger, but she had taken the first step toward proving herself. For the first time, she believed that she could rise above the curse and become the leader Rosehaven needed. Aurora's journey to the eastern provinces had brought hope to one village. But the road ahead remained uncertain. As she and Gabriel rode toward the next settlement, the landscape grew harsher. The drought had left the land parched and lifeless, and the people they passed looked weary and distrustful. When they reached the second village, the reception was colder. Unlike the first village, where the people had been cautiously hopeful, the villagers here seemed outright hostile. A group of men, armed with farming tools, blocked their path. Turn back, one of them shouted. We don't need the princess's pity, or her curse. Aurora dismounted and raised her hands in a gesture of peace. Please, she said, her voice steady. I'm here to listen, not to harm. Let me help. A middle-aged woman stepped forward, her face hard with anger. Help? Like you helped the last village? They say you dug a well, but the rain still hasn't come. What good are empty promises? Aurora felt the sting of the woman's words but refused to back down. I cannot promise rain, she admitted. But I can promise to stand with you and find solutions together. The villagers exchanged skeptical glances. Gabriel leaned in and whispered. Are you sure about this? They don't seem like they want help. Aurora nodded. I have to try. Over the next few days, Aurora worked tirelessly alongside the villagers. Despite their initial resistance, she helped repair their irrigation system, organized food distribution from the palace's supplies, and spent hours listening to their grievances. Slowly, her actions began to soften their hearts. One evening, as Aurora rested by the fire, a young girl approached her, holding a withered flower. This used to be my favorite, the girl said sadly. Do you think it will ever bloom again? Aurora took the flower gently in her hands. I think it will, she said. Sometimes, things need time and care to grow strong again. The girl's mother watched from a distance, her expression softening. She approached Aurora hesitantly. I misjudged you, the woman said. You've shown us kindness when we gave you none. For that, we are grateful. Aurora smiled, her heart swelling with hope. Thank you. I only want to see your village thrive. As they prepared to leave the next morning, the villagers gathered to see Aurora off, though their faces still bore the weight of their struggles. There was a glimmer of hope in their eyes. The woman who had initially confronted Aurora stepped forward, her tone more respectful. Princess, she said, we were wrong to doubt you. You may not bring rain, but you bring something just as important, hope. For that, we thank you. Aurora bowed her head humbly. The true strength of this village lies in its people. I believe in you. As Aurora and Gabriel continued their journey, the prince broke the silence. You're doing more than anyone expected. Aurora. But I can see this is wearing on you. Aurora sighed, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion. I knew this wouldn't be easy, Gabriel. But the doubts, they still linger. No matter what I do, the curse feels like a shadow I can't escape. Gabriel slowed his horse, turning to face her. The curse is just a story, Aurora. What matters is the truth you show people through your actions. You've already begun to change their minds. Aurora nodded, though the doubts still clung to her. She had made progress, but the road ahead was long, and the whispers of the curse still followed her like a ghost. As they approached the next village, a storm gathered on the horizon. For better or worse, Aurora's journey was far from over, and the next challenge awaited. The skies darkened as Aurora and Gabriel approached the third village. Unlike the previous settlements, this village seemed eerily quiet. The streets were empty, and doors were tightly shut. The only sound was the distant rumble of thunder, warning of an approaching storm. Gabriel dismounted his horse, his hand on the hilt of his sword. Something feels wrong, he said, his voice low. Stay close. Aurora nodded, her eyes scanning the empty streets. As they ventured further into the village, an elderly man appeared from behind a shuttered window. What do you want here? He demanded, his voice hoarse. Aurora stepped forward, her tone calm and reassuring. I'm Princess Aurora, and I've come to help. Please, tell me what has happened. The man's eyes narrowed. Help? Like you helped the others? You bring nothing but false hope. Leave before you make things worse. Aurora's heart sank, but she refused to give up. I understand your fears, she said, but I can't leave without understanding what troubles you. Please, let me help. Reluctantly, the villagers began to emerge from their homes. They told Aurora of their plight. A mysterious illness had swept through the village, leaving many too weak to work. Without crops or trade, they were on the brink of starvation. Some whispered that the sickness was a sign of the curse, their voices filled with fear. Gabriel frowned. This isn't a curse. It's a real illness. We need to act quickly before more lives are lost. Aurora turned to the villagers. Is there a healer among you? A frail woman stepped forward. I'm the healer, Your Highness. But I have no supplies left. The drought has made it impossible to gather the herbs I need. Aurora thought quickly. Tell me what you need, and Gabriel and I will find it. We will not leave until this village is safe. The healer hesitated but then handed Aurora a list of herbs and roots. The forest beyond the village is where I'd usually gather them, she said. But it's dangerous. Aurora squared her shoulders. We'll manage. As the storm drew closer, Aurora and Gabriel entered the forest. The air was thick with humidity, and the trees cast long, eerie shadows. Despite the healer's warnings, Aurora pressed on, determined to find the herbs. You're braver than most royals I've met, Gabriel said with a smirk as he scanned the area. But are you sure about this? Aurora smiled faintly. It's not about bravery. It's about doing what's right. These people need us. After hours of searching, they managed to gather most of the herbs. But the storm finally broke. Rain poured down in torrents, soaking them to the bone. Lightning illuminated the forest, and thunder roared like an angry beast. As they hurried back, the muddy ground gave way beneath Aurora's feet, and she slipped, tumbling down a small slope. Gabriel rushed to her side, his voice urgent. "Aurora, are you hurt?" Aurora winced but shook her head. "I'm fine. Let's keep going." They returned to the village just as the storm began to subside. The healer immediately began preparing remedies with the herbs they had gathered. Aurora worked alongside her, helping distribute the medicine to the sick. For the next 2 days, Aurora and Gabriel stayed in the village, assisting wherever they could. Slowly, the sick began to recover, and the villagers' gratitude grew. The elderly man who had first spoken to Aurora approached her. His expression softened. "I was wrong about you, Princess," he admitted. "You didn't bring the curse. You brought hope." Aurora smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Hope is the first step to healing. Together, we can rebuild. As they prepared to leave, the villagers gathered to bid them farewell. The healer handed Aurora a small pouch of herbs. "These will protect you on your journey," she said. "May you continue to bring light wherever you go." Aurora bowed deeply. "Thank you. I will never forget your kindness." As they rode away, Gabriel looked at Aurora with admiration. "You've done more than anyone expected, Aurora. These people believed in the curse, and you proved them wrong." Aurora nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "The curse may still linger in their minds, but I'll keep fighting. If I can bring hope to one village, I can bring it to the whole kingdom." But as the storm clouds cleared, Aurora couldn't shake the feeling that greater challenges awaited. The whispers of the curse had begun to fade, but they had not disappeared entirely, and she knew her journey was far from over. Aurora and Gabriel continued their journey back toward the palace, their spirits buoyed by the progress they had made in the villages. The drought still gripped the kingdom, but the seeds of hope had been planted. Aurora began to feel more confident in her role as princess, though the whispers of the curse still lingered in the back of her mind. As they approached the palace gates, a servant hurried to meet them. His face was pale, and his voice trembled. "Your Highness, Prince Gabriel, you must come quickly. There's been a development." Aurora and Gabriel exchanged a concerned glance before following the servant to the throne room. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. King Edward sat on his throne, his face grim, while Queen Isabella looked visibly shaken. Standing before them was Lord Reginald, his expression unreadable. "What's happened?" Aurora asked, stepping forward. Lord Reginald turned to her, his tone sharp. "Your Highness, we've received troubling reports from the eastern provinces. While you were away, several farms were burned, and supplies sent from the palace were stolen. The people blame the curse, your curse." Aurora felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not true," she said firmly. "I've done everything I can to help the people. Why would they turn against me?" Reginald's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Fear makes people act irrationally. And some would say the drought and misfortune began the moment you returned." Gabriel stepped forward, his voice filled with anger. Enough. Reginald. Aurora has proven herself time and time again. This is not her doing. The king raised a hand, silencing the room. We need facts, not accusations. Reginald. Do you have evidence to support these claims? Reginald hesitated before replying. The villagers say they saw a cloaked figure near the fires. A figure resembling the princess. Aurora's eyes widened in disbelief. That's impossible. I was nowhere near the fires. Queen Isabella rose from her seat, her voice trembling with emotion. Aurora. We believe you. But the people's fears are dangerous. If someone is using your name to sow chaos, we must uncover the truth. Determined to clear her name, Aurora insisted on investigating the matter herself. If someone is framing me, I will find them, she declared. I owe it to the people to prove I am not their enemy. King Edward nodded, though his expression remained troubled. Very well. Gabriel will accompany you. But be cautious. Aurora. If this is a plot against you, the perpetrators will stop at nothing to see it succeed. That evening, as Aurora prepared for her journey, Gabriel found her in the royal gardens. You don't have to do this alone, he said. We'll find whoever's behind this and put an end to it. Aurora smiled faintly, her heart heavy with uncertainty. Thank you, Gabriel. I can't believe anyone would go to such lengths to destroy me. Why would someone want to harm the kingdom? Gabriel's expression darkened. Fear. Greed. Power. There are always those who seek to exploit weakness. But we won't let them win. The next morning, Aurora and Gabriel set out for the eastern provinces once more. This time, the journey felt heavier, the weight of suspicion and betrayal hanging over them. As they reached the outskirts of the region, they began questioning villagers, hoping to uncover clues. One farmer described seeing a figure in a dark cloak setting fire to a barn. It was the princess, he insisted. I saw her with my own eyes. Aurora's chest tightened. That's not possible, she said. I was miles away when this happened. But the villagers' fear was palpable, their trust in her wavering. Gabriel pulled Aurora aside, his voice low. This is no coincidence. Someone is deliberately impersonating you to stoke the flames of fear. As night fell, Aurora and Gabriel set a trap. They hid near a large barn, hoping to catch the culprit in the act. Hours passed in tense silence, until finally, a shadowy figure emerged, carrying a torch. Aurora's breath caught as the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was a woman, dressed in a cloak identical to Aurora's, her face obscured by a hood. Gabriel drew his sword, and Aurora stepped forward. Stop, she called out. Who are you? And why are you doing this? The figure froze, then turned to run. Gabriel gave chase, tackling the woman to the ground. As he pulled back her hood, Aurora gasped. It was one of the palace maids, her eyes wild with fear. Why? Aurora demanded, her voice trembling. Why would you do this? The maid glared at her, defiant. You think you're a savior, but you're just a symbol of destruction. The kingdom was fine before you returned. Aurora's heart ached at the words, but she refused to let them break her. I'm here to help the kingdom. Not harm it, she said. But your actions have endangered countless lives. Why would you betray your own people? The maid remained silent, her expression hard. Gabriel bound her hands and turned to Aurora. We'll take her back to the palace. She has answers we need. As they rode back to the palace with the maid in tow, Aurora couldn't shake the feeling that this betrayal was only the beginning. Someone had orchestrated this plot, and the answers they sought lay deeper than they imagined. The ride back to the palace was tense. Aurora's mind raced with questions about the maid's motives. Gabriel rode silently beside her, his jaw clenched as if bracing for the confrontation ahead. The maid, bound and seated between two guards, refused to speak, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. When they arrived at the palace, King Edward and Queen Isabella were waiting in the throne room. Their faces reflected a mix of relief and concern as Aurora and Gabriel entered with the maid. You've done well to return safely, the king said. Who is this woman? Aurora stepped forward, her voice steady despite her turmoil. She is one of the palace maids, caught impersonating me and setting fires in the eastern provinces. But we still don't know why. The queen's eyes widened in shock. A maid? How could someone so close to us commit such treachery? The maid was brought before the throne and forced to kneel. King Edward's voice was stern. Speak. Why have you done this? Who put you up to it? The maid remained silent, her lips pressed tightly together. Gabriel leaned closer, his tone sharp. You can stay silent, but we will uncover the truth. The more you resist, the worse your fate will be. Finally, the maid's composure cracked. She looked up, her eyes blazing with resentment. I had no choice, she spat. I was promised riches and power if I followed orders. Aurora frowned, her heart sinking. Orders? From whom? The maid hesitated, fear flickering across her face. It was Lord Reginald. He said you would bring ruin to the kingdom and that I'd be rewarded if I helped turn the people against you. Gasps filled the throne room. The king's expression darkened, his hands gripping the arms of his throne. Reginald? My trusted advisor? This cannot be true. Gabriel nodded grimly. It explains everything, the doubts he sowed, his insistence on the princess proving herself. And now this. Aurora felt a mix of anger and betrayal. He manipulated the fears of the people and used me as a scapegoat. He doesn't care about the kingdom, only his own power. Queen Isabella placed a comforting hand on Aurora's shoulder. We will get to the bottom of this. Reginald must answer for his actions. Guards were sent to apprehend Lord Reginald, but he was nowhere to be found. His chambers were empty, his belongings hastily abandoned. A servant reported seeing him leave the palace late the previous night. He's fled, Gabriel said, his voice tight with frustration. He must have realized we were closing in. Aurora felt a surge of determination. We can't let him escape. If he's allowed to spread more lies, the kingdom will fall further into chaos. The king nodded. You're right, Aurora. Reginald must be brought to justice. I will dispatch soldiers to search for him immediately. Later that evening, as Aurora stood in the palace gardens, Gabriel joined her. You've been quiet, he said. What's on your mind? Aurora sighed, her gaze fixed on the stars. I can't believe someone like Reginald would betray us. He was supposed to protect the kingdom. But instead, he almost destroyed it. Gabriel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You've shown the people your strength and compassion, Aurora. Reginald's lies won't undo the good you've done. Aurora nodded, though the weight of the situation still pressed on her. We need to find him, Gabriel, for the kingdom's sake. The next morning, reports arrived that Reginald had been spotted heading toward the western border, accompanied by a small group of mercenaries. Aurora insisted on joining the search party, despite her parents' concerns. I need to see this through, she told them, for the people and for myself. With Gabriel by her side, Aurora set out once more, determined to bring Reginald to justice and to prove, once and for all, that she was more than the whispers of a curse. Aurora and Gabriel rode at the head of the search party, their determination unwavering. The news of Reginald's location spurred them on, and after a day's hard ride, they reached the western borderlands. The area was rugged and desolate, with dense forests and narrow mountain passes, an ideal place for a fugitive to hide. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the landscape in shadows, they spotted a campfire flickering in the distance. Gabriel signaled for the group to halt. That must be him, he whispered. We'll approach quietly and surround the camp. Aurora nodded, her heart pounding. This was the moment she had been preparing for. Despite her fear, she knew she couldn't falter now. The search party moved stealthily through the trees, circling the camp. Reginald sat by the fire, flanked by a handful of mercenaries. He appeared tense, his eyes darting toward the dark forest as if expecting pursuit. Gabriel gave the signal, and the soldiers sprang into action. The mercenaries scrambled to defend their employer, but they were quickly overpowered. Reginald attempted to flee, but Aurora stepped into his path, her voice firm. It's over, Reginald. Surrender. The former advisor froze, his face twisting in anger. You think you've won, he sneered. The people will never truly accept you. The curse will always follow you. Aurora's hands clenched into fists, but she kept her composure. The curse is a lie you used to manipulate others. You tried to destroy me, but instead, you've shown me how strong I can be. Reginald laughed bitterly. Do you really believe that? The kingdom was better off without you. Aurora stepped closer, her voice calm yet resolute. You're wrong. The kingdom doesn't need fear and division, it needs hope. And I will spend my life proving that. The soldiers restrained Reginald and began escorting him back to the palace. As they rode, Aurora couldn't help but reflect on his words. The doubts he had sown still lingered, but she knew that she had the strength to overcome them. When they returned to the palace, Reginald was brought before King Edward and Queen Isabella. The courtroom was packed with nobles and villagers who had come to witness the resolution of the crisis. Reginald, the king said, his voice filled with authority. You are charged with treason, sabotage, and endangering the kingdom. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Reginald remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. The king turned to Aurora. My daughter, You have been at the center of this storm. What do you believe is the proper course of justice? Aurora hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing on her. Finally, she spoke. Reginald's actions have harmed many. But we must not let his hatred define us. Justice must be served. But mercy shows the strength of a kingdom. Exile him, so he can do no more harm. The room murmured in surprise at her decision. But the king nodded approvingly. So be it. Reginald, you are hereby exiled from Rosehaven. You will never again set foot in this kingdom. After the trial, Aurora stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the gathered crowd. The people cheered her name, their faith in her restored. Gabriel joined her, a proud smile on his face. You've done it, Aurora, he said. You've proven yourself as a true leader. Aurora smiled softly. I couldn't have done it without you, Gabriel, or without the people who believed in me. Queen Isabella and King Edward approached, their expressions filled with pride and love. You've shown the kingdom what it truly means to be a princess, the queen said. Not through power, but through compassion and strength. The king placed a hand on Aurora's shoulder. You have earned the trust of the people. And more importantly, you have earned your own trust in yourself. We couldn't be prouder. As the celebrations continued into the night, Aurora reflected on her journey. The whispers of the curse had been silenced, and the shadow of doubt had been lifted. She had faced betrayal, fear, and uncertainty. But she had emerged stronger, ready to lead Rosehaven into a brighter future. Aurora's heart swelled with hope as she looked toward the horizon. The road ahead would not be easy. But she knew she was no longer defined by the curse, or by the fears of others. She was Aurora, Princess of Rosehaven. And her story was just beginning.